listening methodology is a qualitative research approach that seeks to capture the thoughts, opinions, and challenges of communities who are living in conflict, with the objective of unifying this voice and channeling it to those who are in decision-making positions so that it can affect positive change.
The conceptual argument about the listening methodology that this research is a study or it's a science of perceptions, not a science of facts. It's not about what actually or really happens, but more about what people believe has happened. Because in peace and conflict transformation, perception is very important. Because perception is a human behavior. So it's really important that we can find a way to understand the perception of communities or group that we want to study.
Oftentimes, people at the grassroots level felt that their voices is really left out when we talk about policy making and decision making. And that's because I think there's a gap between consulting the people who are living the conflict. And so what the listening research methodology does is that it allows us to bring the people on the process of generating any policy recommendations.
So there are a total of 4 workshops: the planning, training, processing, and consultation workshops. We train 10 to 20 listeners who will then go out and conduct field research and listen to communities.
We need to have a framework that come up with the community representative themselves, because all the questions have to be relevant to the community, relevant to the situation. And so from our experience, when we work with our stakeholders, we would invite 1 or 2 NGOs from our network, or maybe a member from the government department, whoever can help us formulate the research framework or plan for the listening project. We try to make the process in a very non-threatening way. That's why the main terminology we use in listening methodology is conversation. It's not a survey, it's not interview, it's not data collection. We just need to have easy conversation with the community people, and we aim to have non-threatening environments so people can be relaxed and talk freely, and we not push if the situations not allow us to create that kind of environment that we prefer. We rather not push the conversation ahead. We rather than shift to other area, or we'll find other time to come back and conduct the conversation. That's why it's very important the people who will come to tell their story feel relaxed, non-restricted, and feel secure and safe. The participants need to sit and work together, reflect on what concerns the community the most, what are important for the community to talk about, what do they want to tell, and to whom they want to tell, and who are the people or the group who need to know about their story. All this kind of thing is a basic question, but it's very important and give a clear direction when we conduct this listening project.
The participation of all members of a society in the decision-making process, especially in a peace process, allows for legitimacy, ownership of policies and decisions that are also acceptable, suitable, and stable. And so this is one of the core objectives of the listening methodology. Besides this, it allows people who are taking part to examine and explore issues that they're facing to get an accurate reading of what is happening in communities, and from that point to come up with solutions.
So we don't develop questionnaires, but we develop a guiding question. And a guiding question is very much related to the research focus. Because when we have research focus and we develop the objectives and the goal, and we can see what other questions it might be good for asking. It can be some issue-based or kind of a topic or the theme-based For example, we want to know about economy. That's one of the topic. Like can be a community economy situation, or it can be political situation. It can be the livelihood or something like that. And then after we developed it, listener during the training have to practice as a guiding, help them maintain the direction of the conversation. They can develop or can formulate their own question. While the conversation going, they do not have to follow first question, second question. They can jump from first question to the fifth question or seventh question, whatever the flow of the conversation goes. And what they have to do is just remember what are the guiding questions about, and they can just keep rolling along with the conversation. And when we talk about something enough, so they can introduce another topic. Planning the training together, normally from our experience, it can take from 2.5 days to 3 days. And then after that, the listener have to make plan for the field listening or field conversations, including logistics, and sometimes they have to work out the way to communicate and connect, and how to make sure the safety and security has been a priority in their field work. There will be the allocation design, or region assigned to different team, because each conversation from the methodology require more than one person, 2 to 3 people in one conversation, because it will help each other make sure that they work as a team effectively, smoothly, and have different responsibility, including kind of lead the conversation, observe, and make sure that we can understand all this body language, whether they don't feel comfortable or there's something that you need to take a note or respond to. Normally, at least one team would be able to conduct 3 conversations for 1 day. They do not need to take note when they conduct conversation, they just talk. If the memory is fresh, they can remember a lot of things. And so what we encourage them to do is not to take note or try to do something that make the situation threatening to the community people. And after each conversation, they would immediately go somewhere comfortable, or maybe coffee shop, or somewhere under the trees, or a place that they feel comfortable, and just sit down. An individual have to write down what they heard, what they have remembered the conversation was about, and write down in their notebook individually. And at the end of the days, they would need to reflect together and write down in the logbook. The logbook is some things that they have to work together, but notebook they would have to do individually, but not in front of people. In the evening, they will reflect together and write down in the logbook. And the thing they need to write down, not everything, but to discuss what they heard the most, something that people said the most during the day, including some other statistic and how many people you talk to, number, genders, profession, all that kind of thing. Because during conversation you have each other to remember. This is not away from the traditional research. We still follow a lot of key principles, but we don't use that control to restrict the process that we are doing in the field, because we have to do in a way that the situation allows us to do. Many times from our experience, we use this listening methodology when any other research cannot be done. After the listening of few conversations, the listener will have to come back for the processing workshop. The thing also I like to emphasize because we are using the fresh memory, we always recommend that the processing workshop not happen too far from the end of the field conversation or field research. Because the longer you delay the processing workshop, it affects the memory credibility. We would recommend maximum 2 weeks. So during the processing workshop, we kind of start by connect by and ask each other how things went. But after that, we collect all the notebooks and logbook, any written record we collect. Because processing, we would use the memory only. And so we asked the listener to reflect either individually, as a group, or as a group by region. In some situation, we also need to allow the listener to have a session to reflect from what they observed as well. At the end of the processing, we would already have a clear idea of what are the themes, like what are the most heard. However, after this processing, we need to do other things to make sure reliability, credibility of a result come out from the listening project is very important. We need to do the analyzing. It's another process after the information processing workshop. When we go to the field, the research team play mainly as the facilitators. We do not design the framework or anything, but facilitate and develop the framework together with the representatives, sometimes the listener themselves, a part of the planning. Their notebooks, logbooks are all written, and we need to translate it, because when they go to do listening in the community, they will have to write their own in local language. After all is translated into English, we can use the computer software to help us analyze these written data that we have. We can just do like the qualitative research. We develop coding and then we enter all the text from the notebook into the computer. We process that and use the result from that computer processing and check again the memory processing from the listeners. After that, we have a kind of a draft report. The next step also very important, because the listening methodology is not aimed toward only producing the report, because what we use from the report is more important, that we make sure the work that we have done contribute to something better, or better understanding of situation, or promote dialogue, and not end with the report and disseminating it, but also how all this process of the research itself, it contribute to connecting and create conversation and dialogue out of it. After we have a draft, we have layers of consultation with stakeholders. Sometimes we use that for make conversation with different groups to share further discussion on different issues.
The strength of the research methodology is actually being able to listen to the communities who are living the conflict, and at the same time being able to present the key findings to them before publishing the findings of the research. In a way, the research methodology creates the legitimacy of the research findings, because when you make a research and you go on the ground, you're not going back to the ground to present your key findings. Then it's just a transactional way of doing things, whereas in the listening process, we make sure that we consult the stakeholders or the people who are involved in the research in the final findings before we release the recommendations. I think the problem is that in a protracted conflict, if you just release a policy recommendations but it is not relatable to the people on the ground, then there will be challenges in implementing any recommendations or programming.
What differentiates the listening methodology to other research approaches is, I believe, its openness, in that it doesn't force you to work in a rigid framework. but gives people the space to talk about the things that matter to them most.
And so listening project, basically it can be effective way for peace building and dialogue process, and create the possibilities that when the situation is so restricted and close and sensitive, listening can be a way to open up the conversation, a way that people can communicate and learn from each other without confronting each other. And so this knowledge and learning can be shared widely for other peace building communities.